Assalamu alaikum and good evening to each and every one of you. I am very delighted to be here this evening after a while of putting together Bengal to Barbados book signing event. Last Saturday night, the Guyanese Writers Association hosted, among many other writers, Sabir Nakhuda from Barbados. And this evening, we, along with friends of Sabir, including Abdul Patel, Alli from the Global Imam Fund, and Anila Jadunandan, our very famous, and for putting together this beautiful flyer, and everyone else on the team, including Habeeb, who's here with us today volunteering. We have been able to put together an event basically called the Forum for Caribbean Muslims. So tonight you will hear more not only from Sabir, who is our guest of honor, and we'll be having opportunity for book signing after the event, but also from our very own Sheikh Abdullah Hakim. Dr.Abdullah Hakim has a PhD on Black history from University of Toronto, so we'll be hearing more from him. And at the end, we will also have some opportunities to ask questions and to have copies of the book. I would like to introduce you, therefore, to our wonderful friend and colleague, Imam Dr.Abdullah Patel, who happens to be here in Canada for the last 40-odd years, and he himself, coming from the beautiful island of Barbados, couldn't be a more opportune time for us to have a moderator to introduce Sabir and others. I just want to say that Abdul Patel, we are very honored to have him. He himself has been honored in many, many spaces in Canada and around the world for his both literary and Islamic contribution. He is the president for the Ontario Multi-Faith Council, as well as a member of the Canadian Council of Imams. With great pleasure, I'd like to introduce Imam Abdul Patel to moderate today's evening proceedings. By the way, this event is live streamed. If you know of anyone who would like to see it live, you could send them an email or a text. I can give you the information on live stream. We already have a few people looking at it, and we have someone who is moving around the camera to ensure that they capture the event, and people in Barbados and other parts of the world can be viewing this as well online. As well as copies of this video will be made available by thanks to Alli and his videoing company, so you could have copies of that once you make the order. Thanks.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good evening. Welcome to this first ever, whether we call it symposium, book signing event, or a forum on Caribbean Muslims. On behalf of this organizing committee, I'd like to welcome all of you today. And I'm sure that by the end of today's session, you will go home more enriched with knowledge about East Indians and Islam in the Caribbean. So without going forward any further, my job as a moderator is more to moderate the question and answers, not the speakers. But it's really an honor for me to moderate this session, especially with my colleague Sabir, as we shared our teenage years together in Barbados and in Canada as well. He's also lived here as a student. We were both students back in the early 70s here in Toronto. So Dr. Abdullah Hakim, I don't think he needs introduction to you all, who I would say is not only with his knowledge, but his health-wise is a great inspiration, because he's just traveled, just came back from UK 2 or 3 days ago, just for this event. So we are thankful to you for making yourself available as you, with your all that local and international travel. Dr. Hakim, we have known each other going back as for early 70s, 72, since he came to Canada. And he has been not just a scholar, but an icon and really a speaker and also da'i, as we say in Arabic, here in Canada for a number of years. Graduate from Medina in Islamic Studies, from University of Toronto, PhD in African history. So he has done a lot of research, traveled widely, lived in South Africa for a number of years as a lecturer at Cape Town University. So his African tour is also worth noting. When he traveled to Timbuktu and Ethiopia and other places. So there's lots of knowledge to share. We hope to have more of these type of session, discovery of Muslims heritage in different parts of the world. We just returned from Spain last August together, an Andalusian tour. And that is something that I would highly recommend to everyone to go and rediscover the Islamic heritage of Spain. Anyway, that is not the topic here, but let's welcome Dr. Abdullah Hakim.
Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa ba'd. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, I begin with the greeting words of the righteous. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. And these are the words of peace, and we pray that this evening would be a source of peace and a source of understanding. And when I was asked about coming tonight to the program from Bengal to Barbados, I quickly took this opportunity to be present because this topic is actually a personal one for me. Many of you may have known me as a person from the United States, African American, with native background. But actually on my mother's side, her grandmother came from Barbados. And it is that a British man by the name of Charles Bourne came to the island, and he set up a shop in Bridgetown, and he went to a Mr. Bino from the Bino family. Mr. Bino had 21 children, and as an African Bajan. And so Mr. Bino gave Charles his daughter Mary, and my grandmother was born. And she came to the United States. So I have a connection. And many of you may have known Binos, actually. They're pretty good cricket players and whatnot. They're involved in politics and a number of different aspects in the culture. Robin Bino, yeah. So it's very important that we begin to discuss history, and especially to open this up to our community, because this is one aspect of knowledge which has been hidden from us to a certain extent, and which I believe is one of the doors to the future. And I had to grapple with this question as a young person growing up in the Americas, with as an African American, but with native background. My grandmother on the other side is from the Mohawk tribe, so I have like 3 worlds circling around in my blood. So I began to question things at an early age, and when I was very young, as a young student growing up, I was hit with a lot of information. I began to question. The first question that I asked, or one of the questions that I posed to the teacher, which I've traveled around the world and asked people, was who discovered America? And they told me Christopher Columbus. I said, okay, when did he discover? They said 1492. I said, okay, but look at the picture of Columbus here. And you'll see in this picture that, Columbus is surrounded by people. And to make a long story short, I, innocently said to my teacher, how can you discover a place when the people are living there already? Like if I went to Oshawa and I said, Abdullah Hakim has discovered Oshawa in 2013, because the first time I went there. So you are denying the civilization of the people. And actually when I was old enough to go into the memoirs of Columbus and actually see what happened, I realized that Columbus knew about journeys going across the ocean. And when Columbus reached where he had reached, he didn't actually know where he was. So he called the people Indians, but it was not India. He bumped into the Americas on his way to India. And when he went back to Spain, he could not properly, explain where he actually was. Just X that up. So really, to make a long story short, because this is a long discussion which I'm, going to abbreviate, to open up for the next speaker. History really, is the experiences of all of the nations. And if I had my way, and I was involved with the Toronto Board of Education for a while, I would, introduce new concepts so that history is not, as we used to call it, his story. It's our story. You get that? Not his story. And so I would rewrite the book and say Christopher Columbus was discovered in 1492 because he was lost and he bumped into the Americas. The reality is there are over 75 million people living here. 75 million people. Some of the main sects in the world actually come from the Americas. And so it is really important when we celebrate history that we open up the doors, and tonight is an opening because it's opening up another section of history that has also been hidden to the public. Tonight happens to coincide, this is Islamic History Month, and so I want to touch on a little bit about some new reflections about Islamic history. And also it coincides with Black History Month. And I was just in Sheffield in the UK with the Afro-Caribbean community dealing with African history in the West. So I want to touch on that to give a little bit of a flavor, to add some more spice to the pot so we can enjoy, our evening even better. In terms of the major point, the major raising of Islam in the world, and you look between the 7th and the 15th centuries, even though in our history books this is called the Dark Ages, this was actually the time when Muslims were in the pinnacle of knowledge. And coming out of Arabia, one man, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, told his followers to go out and to seek knowledge, that they should seek knowledge from the cradle to the grave. And so they did this, and by reaching India and China and Africa and Europe, they assimilated the knowledge of the different peoples that they went into. And so what you find in this period of time is an amazing revolution, in a sense, in knowledge. And what Muslims were doing is that they were taking theoretical knowledge and putting it into a practical sense, because Islam was spreading at a rapid rate, not by large armies, but it's the message that they were giving. They were able to go across barriers, right, with a type of, we call Tawheed, which is unity. It unifies the concept of God, and it also unifies science with spirituality. You see, so that concept now, unifying life, brought in people, and it made people, stand together, which was a very rare thing at the time, 1400 years ago. And so the Muslims, of course, in many areas, many disciplines, they actually, led the world. There are a few which are of importance to us. In astronomy, in navigation, you will see some amazing achievements that Muslims made. Because naturally, when we want to pray, we pray toward Mecca, the Qibla. So therefore, every Muslim, in a sense, has to know direction. Even if you're a common person, you're going to be thinking which way is north and which way is east. And what some people carry a compass around with them. How many people, other than scientists, walk around with a compass in their pocket? Okay, so that was a natural thing for us. And also, when you want to make pilgrimage to Mecca, as people are making right now in the journey they're making now, you come from different parts of the world. So the Muslims put together the first international travel guides. The same way, if you want to travel across Canada, you go to the Canadian Automobile Association, and the CAA will give you a map, and your trip ticks, and it will tell you, take this highway, and if you want to go to Vancouver, then turn right, take the other highway. It even has some information about hotels and whatnot. So the Muslims made travel guides that actually gave people ideas about mountains, rivers, good land, hostile things, information, and they put it all together. Actually, the first encyclopedias were done by Muslims. The word almanac, and in our generation, we used to use the almanacs and the encyclopedia. Today, they Google it, or they go to the Wikipedia, right? But we used to have an almanac. Almanac is an Arabic word, almanach. It's an Arabic word. Now, how many people here know that the word almanach is actually the word almanac? Okay? So the development of the magnetic needle, the compass, the sextant, the astrolabe, this is how the books used to look. Arabic language was similar to how we're using Latin script today. And so you'll find, scientific achievements being made. These are actually, you find these are sextants and compasses, and the people of Oman, the Omanis, they passed this on from generation to generation. And so it was these instruments that enabled the Portuguese, who had just conquered old Muslim lands, and the Spanish to travel the seas. This is how Da Gama went around the Cape of Good Hope, right? This is how Magellan, this is how all the different conquistadors who came out of Europe traveled. They benefited from the science of the Muslims. And it was interesting because you'll see one of the great caliphs, the Khalifa, his name was Al-Ma'mun. And during the Abbasid period, he brought together scientists of all nationalities. It was the first modern think tank. So in this think tank, you would discuss, for instance, zero. So he'd bring a Hindu man, a Buddhist, a Christian, a Muslim. He'd sit down, talk about numbers. Is there a thing called zero? So the man from India would probably raise his hand and say, yes, we have this concept from ancient times. The man from Egypt, also with the pyramids, would also probably have raised his hand and said, we had zero in 3000 BC. Because when you go to the Old Kingdom, you'll see in the step pyramid of Saqqara, you will see zero and decimal numbers, and they had this concept. So they assimilated this information and they put it together. And so they were able to make some amazing achievements, which we don't have time to go into tonight. But what I do want to mention, just to open up the floor for the Caribbean, to show you that the Caribbean was not actually a far away. It was not far away. It was actually close to the other parts of the world, closer than what you think. Going through Arabic writings, I came across some astounding things. The writings of Al-Mas'udi, the writings of Al-Idrisi, Ibn al-Qutiyya, Al-Umari, a number of writings, amazing things. And in these Arabic writings, they were talking about journeys across the Atlantic Ocean. That people crossed the ocean, and in some cases, like in the case of Mas'udi, he came back. Khashqas came back to Spain, and he said everybody in Al-Andalus knew about the journey of this man. That he had gone across the seas, encountered people, came back with goods, and he was describing it to the people of Al-Andalus. This is how the maps would have looked at that time. And this map to you looks like it's upside down, right? But actually, that's the way they used to look at the world. This was not north, this was south, where you are now. Okay, and that's all how your bearing is. It's how you look at the world, it's what we call centering yourself. If you're Eurocentric, you will center yourself in Greenwich Mean Time. Somebody asked me a question the other day, where is the Middle East? I said, okay, the Middle East, if you're in England, you're in Greenwich, that's the Middle East, and China is the Far East. But if you're in China, is that the Far East? No. That's the center of the world. You see? So when you say the Middle East, you are centering yourself with another concept, right? So the actual, if you look at the map the other way around, okay? And on this map, you'll see the map, Arabia, and you will see where the arrow is pointing at on the top. They said Arad Majhula, unknown territory. This is a map that was done, around 956 AD, and it's actually showing the Americas there on the map itself. Across, the Atlantic long before Columbus. And we have now documented proof that in West Africa, there's a great emperor. His name was Mansa Musa. He was on the Empire of Mali, which is now the coast of Senegal and Gambia and into Mali and these regions there. Mansa Musa made pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324. He had so much gold with him. He had more gold than anybody else on earth. He had so much gold with him that he changed the economy of every country that he reached. When he came into Egypt, they gave him a special guard, and he was able to go into make his pilgrimage. But he describes in Al-Umari's book that his predecessor, Abu Bakr, went into the Atlantic with 2,000 ships, and he never came back. Okay, so now there's documented evidence that they reached, they went from Senegal into Brazil. And they traveled along the Amazon into Panama, into Mexico, into America. And a Harvard University scholar, Leo Weiner, see if you can get that to move by your hand. Leo Weiner, he wrote a book called Africa and the Discovery of America. He's a Harvard University scholar. He showed how these people they call Mandingo, right? Now these terms we know from the Caribbean, right? But the original terms when you say Mandingo or Fuller man, right? When you say these terms, these are nations in West Africa, right? These are actually nations. They say, oh, you Fuller man. Okay, these are nations. These are people, you know, who are very powerful, who have very powerful nations. We have a map here which is done by Piri Reis. He's a Turkish cartographer. In 1517, he presented a set of maps to the Ottoman leader Selim I, and on this he has a perfect, drawing of South American coastline. It's almost exact. Now, how could he have known this in 1517 when Columbus only came in 1492? You see that? So this is hard evidence that we have now, that Muslims were actually crossing over. And that crossing over, you know, you take the currents. If you see how the currents move here, you will see the current will take you right across from West Africa. You can take one down here low into there, or you take another one, it'll take you right into Barbados, right? And sometimes when you're Barbados, you get a sandstorm from the desert in the Sahara, right? You'll see pieces of wood coming across from West Africa on the shore, right? So you don't have to have a special boat. You don't have to be on the Nina and the Pinta and the Santa Maria. This is the Arab dhow. This Thor Heyerdahl, a Norwegian scientist, in order to prove this now, he did a boat. He had African people make the boat, and they crossed the Atlantic. He crossed it by himself. So he proved that it could have been done without using the Portuguese or Spanish technology. This is Mansa Musa, the great emperor. And so his older brother who sent across the ships. These inscriptions are found all over now. People are bringing them up now. They're all along the Amazon. They're in Panama. They're up in Belize. You know, when Balboa and these people reached into Panama, they were told that there were dark-skinned people who were already there. They were all over the region. The British call them Black Caribs. They use the name Black Caribs, right? And they said they were shipwrecked slaves. But how could they be shipwrecked when the Spanish ran into them when they first came? You see? So this information is all over the region now, and it's a very interesting study which is going on, to unearth. Again, it's not just a story, it's our story, right? What is of more importance to us and brings us now closer, to our topic tonight, and that is the slavery period. It is during the slavery period, see if you can move that by your hand again. It is during the slavery period that people were brought from Africa into the South America, into the Caribbean. They were brought into the region. Okay? Now, these are some of the heads that the Spanish would have run into. You see these faces there, right? See that face? This was done before Columbus in Mexico. He's got a turban on. This is before Columbus. Look at that face there. The keloid scarification on the face, that's West African. Because if you have a lot of melanin, you'll get the welts when you get a cut, right? So they use it for scarification. Okay, try it with your hand again. So now it is during the slavery period, right? Now evidence has come that somewhere between 15 to 30% of the slaves were actually Muslims. 50, in some places, 30%. The first slaves to come into the New World came from the Senegambia region. In 1522, the Wolof made a major revolt in Hispaniola, also in Puerto Rico, and in Panama. So the Wolof, try it with your hand again. I think it's not responding to this. The Wolof, of Senegal a number of slave revolts happened. We have a number of names now. I'm just introducing this topic to you in order to set the groundwork for our main topic tonight. And that is the Muslim presence that is in this region already. These are some of the names of very famous people to us that you will see. You see Muhammad Kaaba, right? Abu Bakr Siddiq. Abu Bakr Siddiq is from Jamaica, Kingston, Jamaica. He was writing in classical Arabic. They were writing into the countryside. Okay, Francois Macandal. You know the great revolt of Toussaint Louverture in Haiti. When we study the history now, we found that there were two great leaders before Toussaint Louverture, Bookman and Macandal. These are what is called Marabout or Murabit. They were scholars, and they started the revolts on the plantations. And Toussaint Louverture, because of his abilities as a general, he organized the revolts. And then you had the Great Revolt of Haiti. With your hand again. Oh, Lizzie Gray, right? Phoebe. There are many names now all over the region. These are some of the faces of the people now. We actually have their faces. In 1835, there was a major slave revolt in Brazil. And so powerful that the Portuguese gave them boats and said, you can go back home. So many of them went back to Lagos, West Africa, and you can pray in a Brazilian mosque in Nigeria now. In Suriname, Dutch Guyana, a great revolt led by the Bush blacks. The leader was named Arabi. His general was called Zamzam, like Zamzam water, right? These are famous people in Suriname now. There's a big resurgence in Suriname. There are African Surinamese coming in by the hundreds. And many of them are coming from the area of the Bush blacks. Okay, that's happening right now. Also in Trinidad, there's information of Mandingo societies. It's all over the region. And if you go back in the writings, and we hope to get a chance to go to Barbados, to go into some of the writings there, you will see it in the writings. I went to the Bahamas, and I went to the archives, and I asked the woman, the archivist, do you have anything in Arabic? She said, no, but we have something in Ethiopian Amharic. So I said, can I see it? And she brought it to me, and it was Arabic. It was a Muslim seeking refuge from the devil, and then he wrote, Surat al-Falaq, Surat al-Nas. It was very clear what it was, right? And then they also said the island of Exuma was populated by mostly people who are Mohammedans. They use the word Mohammedans, and this is the Middle Ages name for Muslim, right? So the island of Exuma, which is well-known island in the Bahamas chain, it was the majority of the people are Muslims, Muslim background, right? So this is coming up all over the region. And it is a very interesting study. Do it by hand. Very interesting study. These are some of the writings, the actual writings that we have now. These are some of the people. This person lived in Mississippi. Those of you who do research, it's called Prince Among Slaves. You can get the book or you can get the documentary. Right? That's his writing there. Okay? This is the patriarchs. Some of the faces. This is Umar bin Sayyid. Right? Actual faces of the people, who suffered during the slavery period. And, but, unfortunately, the slavery period, because the brutality that people faced, they were forced to leave their religion, they lost their language, they lost their culture, the families were broken apart. And it is only now, after centuries, that people are now realizing that this is a very important part, of the history of the region, and it's something that everybody should be aware of, not only people of African descent. This is Caribbean history here. These are writings which are coming out of Brazil, especially out of the Caribbean, out of the United States. In the Smithsonian Institute, they have the whole Quran written by heart by a slave in America. So this is all coming to the surface now. And these are some of the actual faces of the people, who are descendants or the actual ones from the times there. Do it again, one more time for me. Again, of the people in the region. So this is part of our history, and it is extremely important. What we do realize is that for moral reasons, or some people say for economic reasons, the British decided that slavery is not going to work. It goes against Christian principles. There were abolitionists who were fighting. And also, economically, it was becoming a problem. Part of it is because of the actual transfer of people. I mean, how long can you keep that up? Secondly, also the revolts that were happening. Do it by hand for me. The revolts that were going on, also, it made it a problem. And so they began the indentured labor system. And this is where people will be brought from India and from from Java, Indonesia, as indentured laborers. And that's another really important part of our history that we have. For the most part, in conclusion, the African slaves that were there were known for Tawheed, monotheism, Tahara, purity. They took a lot of time to purify themselves, and also calling to righteousness and forbidding evil. This is a quality. These three qualities were known amongst the African slaves. By hand. And in conclusion, many of you may have heard of Malcolm X before, right? But you usually see Malcolm with a nice suit and a tie, right? That's Malcolm X. Look at him in the middle. That's him at the end of his life, right? He's wearing the clothes of the ulama, scholars. What does he have in his hand? It's a book. It's education, right? So the 3 E's, which we have been sharing with people, which are so important in our communities: education, empowerment, and engagement, right? Educate yourself, empower yourself, and then don't hide in your little mosque or a center or whatever. Engage society, right? And tonight, I believe, is part of that engagement, this excellent work that has been done by my brother. May Allah bless you, for your work. And we pray that we can work together more in the region to bring out this history to the younger generation, so that we can now see a beautiful story. It's not his story, but it is our story. So I leave you with this, and I ask Allah to have mercy on me and you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Takbir. I don't think I want him to stop. Do we have time till midnight that we can continue? You can see the wealth of knowledge that Abdullah Hakim is a traveling book or history. And what is really maybe shocking to you, that all this research, this evidence, like if somebody was speaking without this PowerPoint presentation, people may not believe, say, oh, you are just making up something. But here he has presented the evidence, which you don't normally see from academics so often. But now with technology, this Abdullah has undertaken all this journey to rediscover Islam in the West at his own expense. He would welcome any sources of any support. Not that I'm doing any fundraising here, but something that can help him and others, because there is now awakening among the academics here. I just finished reading a book, Vikings in America. And there were Vikings here. They're trying to dispel the myth that Columbus discovered America, the same thing. But long before Vikings came, as you see, Muslims were here already. And he mentioned about Thor Heyerdahl, and I remember his first expedition, Kon-Tiki, which he undertook with the expense from United Nations, to travel from Chile on raft to Polynesian islands. He said that's how people in Australia and New Zealand, Pacific Islands, the inhabitants came from South America. So from Muslims who were there, they went further than that into the Pacific, right to the southern hemisphere. And then he said, he tried to prove what Sheikh Abdullah has said about Muslims coming from West Africa. First time he attempted, if I recall, his boat capsized, reeds, Egyptian reeds. That's what he said. They can sail the Atlantic rough waters. And he came to about 200 miles off the shore of Barbados, right, Sabir? Yeah. And it was capsized. And he had Muslim sailors with him as well. And then he made a second attempt and came to, because Barbados is the most eastern island in the chain of Caribbean islands. So people coming from the west came to the island. Now, the next speaker we have is from Barbados. And he can tell you more about the island history. But one thing, as myself, what you mentioned, Sheikh Abdullah, that when I was a student in grade 11 with fourth form in Barbados and reading the British history, the British historian admitted that because one chapter was on religion among the slaves. He says there were many Muslims. The British historians write that, and I was really surprised to read The Making of the West Indies. Some of the other Guyanese and Trinidadians may have used that book in high school as well. That said there were many people who could read the Quran by heart. They were Hafiz in that book, which was really surprising that they wrote that. And what you saw just now, the features. The one thing that bothered me so much was because I'm also doing a research on the Muslim settlement in Barbados in the Caribbean as well. It's when Barbados was, they said, first came to be known, not discovered, by the Portuguese sailor, who came and found the trees, which in Barbados, the evergreen trees, they have long roots hanging down from the branches, and he called them bearded trees, and he named Barbados, means bearded island. Now, I don't know where would we find bearded trees or ever call in any language trees bearded trees, but from the history, we know there were tribes called Arawaks and Carib living in Barbados. And I've seen Arawak pictures in the history book with beard. So it is the people with beard that he might have seen and named the island Barbados, not the trees. So these are things that now being rediscovered. But anyway, our next speaker can tell you more about the island of Barbados, Sabir Nakhuda, who came all the way from Barbados. He brought some sunshine, I guess. That's why we have the sunny weather here. So he has undertaken this journey, a tremendous piece of research that took him to as far as remote villages in Bengal, where there was no transportation or electricity and things, and found the ancestors of people who came to live in Barbados more than 80 years ago. So this is really a commendable effort, Sabir, that brings out history, because I don't remember the quote, but says, if we don't know our past, we can't make our future. So without saying anything more, please welcome Sabir Nakhuda.
Brother Abdullah, Hakim Quick, Imam Moderator, Brother Habeeb, distinguished guests, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I know all of you would have seen the pamphlets or the flyer, and I think they have portrayed me as a self-described Bajan Indian, and maybe they are right. I am a Bajan Indian, and I think we Bajan Indians are different, I'm sure. A lot of Bajan Indians here, and they could speak for that. We are different in many ways, and as Imam Abdullah says, Barbados is the most easterly of all the Caribbean islands. We are more in the Atlantic Ocean than we are in the Caribbean. We are also different in our dietary habits. We are different. When I said that, I mean different from the Indo-Trinidadians and the Indo-Guyanese. We are different in a sense that our food is different. We don't really cook a lot of curry goats. We don't really have a lot of parathas and the doubles. We more go into yellow rice and yogurt, which we call khichdi and curry. And we also, of course, we eat the royal food, which is the biryani. And samosa now is a household name in Barbados. And there will never be a function in Barbados without samosas. I don't mean East Indian function. I mean Barbadian function. So I think that is the East Indian gift to the Barbadian society, a culinary gift to the Barbadian society, our samosas. And a lot of our ladies are making, are busy now making samosas for different families and different weddings and so on. So in other words, there is no wedding or no birthday party without samosas in Barbados. But irrespective of our superficial differences, I think we are member of one Muslim Ummah and holding hands with our Caribbean Muslim brothers and sisters. So our difference in food or our difference in our language does not make any difference in who we are as one Muslim Ummah, walking hand in hand together as one Caribbean people. People always ask me what prompted me to write this book, Bengal to Barbados. What really happened prior to my publication, my launch around the 17th of May this year. Hardly anything was written about East Indians of Barbados. There were a few interviews here and there with those who had come in the 50s and the 60s, but nothing of substance, like who came to Barbados first, what made them come, what form of transportation did they use, what type of business did they carry on. So then I thought that I needed to find out more, because actually I'm a very inquisitive person. I like to know things. So I decided that I think that I should take up the mantle and learn more about who were the first East Indians that came to Barbados. So I took up, and I had some things going for me too, because when I came to Barbados, I was about 10 years old, in the late 50s, and I had a very good knowledge of the island, demography of the island, and the people too, because in Barbados, most of the East Indians at that time, and many now, are into itinerant trading business, going door to door, countryside, selling on credit, and going back every week to collect on the card. They call it the card. So I had a very good knowledge of that. And then the other advantage I had was that I could speak Gujarati, Hindi, Urdu, and of course, good old Bajan dialect. I have realized that all of these came in and was very helpful for me, because the older Gujaratis, the older East Indians, they like to converse in their own language. They feel more comfortable. And then there are some words that you cannot really put it into English anyway. And the Barbadian older heads love to talk in Bajan dialect, like wana, and I'm sure it means you, plural. And so those were the advantages I had. I went around the countryside, speaking, interviewing a lot of old people, those who used to buy from the itinerant traders. I also interviewed many Gujaratis, and I also interviewed many Sindhis, because at that time there was no partition. So before the partition, Hyderabad, Sindh was also part of India. I also interviewed lots of Barbadian women who had married to early Bengali. And actually they were the ones who had given me the names of their husband's village. And so equipped with that, and I have a good knowledge of Gujarat because I'm a Gujarati and I go to India often. So it made it easy for me. So equipped with the names of all the villages, my wife and I, we took the journey to research, to go to India, to go to West Bengal, to go to Hyderabad, Sindh, and find these villages. Now Gujarat is easy for me because I know Kafleta, Lajpur, and many other villages in Gujarat. But West Bengal was very difficult. In India, a district may have about 200 or 300 villages. And then you have to find this particular village, Jeanpur or Herat or, whatever from those 300. And it was difficult. But I had a good friend in my village. He was from West Bengal, so he helped me a lot. And, it was challenging, but it was also very, very interesting. Speaking to older heads, they were always coming forward, helping you. They were always eager. But one of the experience I had, and I thought I should tell you, is that what we used to do is like we would go in a village, interview some people. And then we had a plan where we would overnight in another village, organized by my friend. And this particular evening, we got delayed. So it was getting dark. And those of you who went to India know that Indians do not drive slow. I mean, they are always driving at a breakneck speed. You know, if there is no one on the road, they still drive fast. It's like, you know, they have to get to that point as soon as possible, as fast as possible. And so the driver was just, you know, driving. So I said, well, aiste chalao na bhai. He said, oh, dusre gaon jana hai, you know. So maybe, oh, you know, we have to go to the next village. Take it easy, man. So I told him maybe 2 or 3 times, you know. And he's still driving. So then I just kept quiet. My wife, after a while, says, so, why you are so quiet? I said, well, I'm praying. You know, I prayed the dua that has to do with getting up from sleep, going to sleep, going to the washroom, any dua you could think about. Actually, there were some prayers that I had forgotten. You know, I remember them. So I told her, well, you know, I'm praying. She said, what are you praying about? I said, well, I'm praying because at the rate this man driving, I don't think I will ever get back to Barbados and write this book. No. She said, you're not Muslim? So, of course. Well, trust in Allah. So maybe I trusted in Allah, and that's why I'm here before you talking about this book, Bengal to Barbados. Unlike the arrival of the East Indians to Trinidad and to Guyana and to the other Caribbean countries, in Barbados, the East Indians came on their own, or you can say they came independently and accidentally. The first person to come to Barbados was from West Bengal. And when I was walking the streets, or if you want to call it the tract of the village, and going to the home of this first East Indian, Bashat Ali Diwan, I mean, you know, it took me 2 days to get to that village. I had to stop at the village and then go back again, leave about 6 o'clock after Fajr, and I got there like 3 o'clock. And they were saying, how the hell did this guy forget about coming to Barbados? I mean, ever got to Calcutta, you know, because I know what I went through. So he was one of the first person. He came to Barbados around 1910, and he didn't set out to come to Barbados. Apparently, his father-in-law was in Trinidad. I don't know whether he came as an indentured laborer or whether he came on his own. And after a few months, he decided that I'm going to go to Barbados. And so he came to Barbados and started. He is the first person to start the itinerant trading business in Barbados, and started it itinerant trading. And then later on, he opened stores. And of course, he would have called people from his village and his families. Then the second batch of people from India came from Gujarat, from Kafleta. They had earlier set out to go to Brazil to cut lumber, but they somehow end up in French Guyana, and then to British Guyana. And one of them was Hafiz Kasuji. So they told him, well, look, you see, they want to do some business. So the Guyanese Muslim said, well, why don't you trade with Barbados? Get a schooner, put some coconuts and charcoal in it, and trade with Barbados. So they decided, yes, that's a good idea. And they made these trips 2 or 3 times and saw the Bengalis and decided that Bengalis are eating chicken. And you know, chicken was a luxury in India in those days. So they decided, okay, you know, let's stay in Barbados. So here the second batch of East Indians from Gujarat decided now to make Barbados their homes, and they eventually would have called their families. Today in Barbados, many of the East Indians, especially the Muslims, they are all from Gujarat. Kafleta, Dabil, Bardoli, all of those villages. And then the third set of East Indians that came was from Hyderabad, Sindh. He came from, at that time he was a province of India, but now it's Pakistan. His name was Jivat Ram, and he had set off to go to Bermuda to his brother-in-law to help him out because the brother-in-law wanted to go to India for a few months. He went there, and then he said, well, I also believe that I should settle in the Caribbean. And they decided, okay, well, why don't you go to Barbados? So here you have the third East Indian, coming from Hyderabad, come in accidentally and settled in Barbados. After that, we also had some professionals come in after our independence, assisting in setting up the Meteorological Institute, the Insurance Corporation of Barbados. And in around 1970s, we had doctors from India come into our hospital, the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. There was one time about 30% of the doctors from India, 30% at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital were doctors from India. Right now we have our own doctors now, so there is not that need for doctors from India. However, we have the East Indian, the local Bajan Indians have now taken over, and many of them now are doctors in the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, Barbados. The early East Indians did itinerant trading. And itinerant trading is like you go house to house, sell your wares, and then and in those days they will have a suitcase. You remember when you go to India and from the train station you have your suitcase, and then the coolie would put the suitcase on the top of his head and take you to your destination. Many of them would do that. They're tired and hungry. They work from 7 o'clock until 7 in the night. And so the Barbadians, the local Barbadians, then give them a name. You would say, oh, the coolie man is here. But they didn't mean in any derogatory term. I thought the way how I understand it, and I thought that the way how they also understood is that this individual who is doing a coolie trade or someone who is a salesman, the life was very, very hard, I was told. But even before that, their coming to Barbados was also very, very difficult. Many of them had to sell their land, they had to mortgage or pawn their wives' jewelry. And then coming by boat, sometimes it would take like 2.5 months, 3 months. I remember there's an incident where these guys from Kafleta came through New York. And in the village, they told them that, when you go to America, these people rob you with a gun. So don't open your door. So they were in the hotel, and people come to ask them to come and eat. And they won't open their door. And on the boat, too, they're not accustomed to smelling hot dog and that type of food, so they would vomit. So it was very, very difficult for them. It was equally difficult for them when they came to Barbados because most of them couldn't speak English. And they came with very few, they had very few, they didn't have much money. Some came with like $50 or $100. But they decided that they would start to do this itinerant trading. And in those days in Barbados, the Barbadian local work in Barbados could not come to town to shop. And even if they did, they had to pay on a cash basis. And so these itinerant traders, it was a niche market. So they would go out where they are working on the plantation and so on, and sell these black Barbadians whatever they need, shirt, pants, school shoes, school shirt for the kids, on a credit basis. And they would get like 6 cents and 10 cents and 25 cents. Otherwise, they would have had to go in town and they had to pay cash, COD, cash or delivery, which they couldn't afford. And so, according to many historians, they were considered as the partners in poverty to the black Barbadians. And so they built this relationship with the black Barbadians that existed even up to today. Now, of course, that whole selling process has gone up. In other words, they don't only sell 2.5 pieces of material, but they sell you blocks and kitchen sink and whatever you think about. I think some even sell you motor cars. In those days, they even used to sell, false teeth for those who didn't have teeth. But now the whole thing has changed. So those were the things that the itinerant traders would sell, to the Barbadians. nevertheless, while they were even working hard from 7 until 7, they did not forget their religion. The Bengalis, and even today, they are not as literate in Islam or even in other ways, because communism has been ruling that province of West Bengal and Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, of those who would have gone that area. I mean, communism is a religion of those people. So they know nothing else except that religion. So among the Gujarati, they had this Hafiz, Kasuji. After coming home and after being tired, they would then still sit with them under a kerosene lamp to teach them Islam, the basic principle of how to read your salah, because they didn't have that much knowledge, to show that they were very, focused on what is their priority. The Bengalis had also married to a lot of Barbadian women in early times. But what they did is that they never forced their wives to leave their religion, Christianity. They continued to practice their faith. And the Bengalis and the Gujaratis would pray in homes, but they would never force their wives or their children to become Muslims. So the wives continued to follow her faith. She would take along her children to whatever denomination, whether it's Pentecostal, Catholic, Adventist, whatever it is. Shows, that these people were gentle and kind. And speaking to the Bengali families, even to the wives and the kids, they thought that the Bengalis were the nicest fathers that they ever had. And even today, when I speak to the grandchildren, and actually the children especially, they speak so highly of their father. They were always there for them. Two things you can have in the house. You can have pork in the house, and you can have alcohol in the house. So those are the kind of, relationship the Bengalis would have with their families and so on. Thank you. Of course, the Gujaratis, we are ones, wherever we go, we always make sure that we have a masajid. And so within 20 years of coming to Barbados, of course, we were because we were fortunate, we have had a lot of alims. Within 20 years, we have had our first masajid. In 1951, we had opened a masjid in Kensington New Road. And many people made great sacrifices. In Sobers Lane, that was the first house. And Ibrahim Degia, whose son is here right now, he made great sacrifices, going door to door, collecting money. Maybe sometimes they would collect like $30 in a week. And they would put all the money inside. And then they would, on their off days, they would help build the masjid, do labor work. So these are the sacrifices that the early East Indian Muslim made, so that Islam is there for us today, well established. And today we have about 4 masajids, alhamdulillah. We have about over 150 hafiz. The population of East Indian Muslims in Barbados is no more than 2,000, which include men, women, and children. We have approximately 150 who fast, and maybe about 20, 25 alimas. And we have a Muslim school. It is the top 10 school in Barbados, top 10 private school in Barbados. Of course, the condition of the Muslim changed in 1965 after the coming of Maulana Yusuf from Kaflita, the start of the Tabligh Jamaat. I look at some of the pictures that I put in my book. You see everybody clean shaved, and now, 10 years later, now you see each house, everybody, have a beard, alhamdulillah. People are, praying their salah. And so Tabligh Jamaat has played a very pivotal role in molding the Muslim community of Barbados, to be focused, to know. Of course, before too, they used to pray their salah, of course, keep their psalm, really go to Hajj. This year, I think we had like about 26 people went to Hajj. So every year, I would say that there is no home in Barbados that do not have a Haji. So this is the position of Islam in Barbados, but more can be done. I know we are working on some outreach program. Dr. thing. Hakim, I go on some shows and so on. And Barbadians are very receptive and gentle and kind people. Maybe they were not Mandingos. Maybe they were Fulanis. And so, whenever we need to say something or we invited them, they always come. And they expose Muslim. So our population is 2,000. And I would say that we probably get maybe, 500% exposure as compared to our population, So they have been very, very kind to us, both print media and both electronic media. My purpose of writing this book is also to continue that momentum and to create better understanding between the Barbadians and the East Indians. Because although they, will be very amicable, very peaceful, very kind, gentle, they don't know much about our faith. They don't know much about our salah, our psalm. They don't know our eating habits. So I think that part of the purpose of the book is to create that awareness, that better understanding, so that when they see that itinerant trader praying under a tamarind tree or a mango tree, they would know, oh, he is praying salah. So this book is also to help Barbadians have a better understanding, who we are, because, we are there in Barbados to stay. This book is also a small effort in removing many misconceptions and concerning the East Indians in Barbados, because there's another thing too that has to do with East Indian. They talk about East Indians, working obey and having a steel donkey and does evil things if you don't pay him. And I think sometimes the East Indian also took advantage of that. He didn't really do it, but he didn't say no, we don't do it, because the advantage was that if you go and the person don't pay, the neighbor will say you didn't pay him, he can put baku on you, so you put baku on you, and he didn't say no, we don't do it. Like when I was interviewing one person and he said, we really didn't do it, but we are really guilty. I said, well, you should tell them. You say, no, but what happened one day, this customer won't pay me at all. And so it was Zahar times. I went just a little further and, rolled my mat and I was paying my Zahar. So the neighbors saw. So they went to her and said, Pasi, you didn't pay the India mat, he can put baku on you. And, he said, lo and behold, following week when I went, she paid me all of my money. Because I don't want you to put this thing on me. So they leave there because I thought maybe it was good for them. So they use that fear, I suppose. But now I think the fellas don't care. They know that was a myth. And so this is the purpose for my coming here, really to educate and tell you a little bit about how I went about getting the finding different people and some of the things that I wrote. There are many things that you would find in there, East Indians in the Barbadian folklore, and the contribution that we have made too. For example, right now the table, the cabinet table where the ministers sit, were given as a gift from the Muslim community of Barbados to the government and people of Barbados on the Independence Day. It was a pure mahogany table. And even the chair, the speaker chair, is also the gift from the East Indian community of Barbados to the government and people of Barbados. So with these few words, I wish to thank you for listening to me, and may Allah bless you and guide each and every one of us. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you.
Takbir, Jazakallah khairan. I don't think we want to end this session today. That you're just missing more and more information. And again, the people who were here, I had to answer, and to this day, more questions to Muslims about Islam than to non-Muslims. So the kind of people who were here in those days, that Brother Ikram has been a good colleague and supporter in those days to uphold I would say the flag of Islam in those days, along with many other people that were there at the time. And then with the arrival of Dr. Abdullah Hakim, we really got big boost as well, inshallah. So some of us have been here struggling in Barbados. I went through that phase of walking with a suitcase as a young boy myself. My father had moved there in 1934, and my family everyone is still there, but Allah has chosen me to stay in Canada, I would say. Yeah. Now the next speaker is also no stranger to us, is Imam Habeeb Alli, a journalist and a scholar of Islam who has also become an icon in the community in both Islamic work and interfaith work. And he is currently working as an outreach worker with IDRF, well-known, one of the first Islamic or Muslim NGO in Canada that was established here. So Brother Habeeb Alli, who is going to speak about Muslims and East Indians in Guyana. Please welcome Habeeb Alli.
Very much. I didn't really plan to do much of that, but it's a synergy that we have enjoyed in the Caribbean, the East Indians coming to Guyana as much as they came to Trinidad, Barbados, Jamaica, and other parts of the Caribbean. After the end of slavery in 1838, there was the first batch of East Indians came to Guyana, and the Hesperus was the ship that came from Calcutta. Now the usual question, and I wanted to call up Dr. Hakim quick and Sabir as well to take some questions from the audience. One of the questions that I've had shared with Sabir from the academics is that indentured laborship or the indentured service that came to Guyana and Trinidad and Suriname, they came under coercion and forced, and they were lured off the Calcutta by the British to enter into labor, a 5-year period labor contract in Guyana. However, in the Bengal to Barbados, you have shown that they willingly came as immigrants, as merchants, as business people, and that is not the idea of the East Indians in the Caribbean. So you could address that when I call you up. And Dr. Abdullah Hakim, quick, I would like you to address for us that the nexus and the relationship between the African Muslims in Guyana, like the rest of the Caribbean, and that of the East Indians has always been seen, thanks to the British, that of divide and rule, where these are two separate communities, two separate races, separate altogether ethnicities, and that they have had their somewhat dotted history of conflicts, etc. Now, do you see that Islam in any way has played a role, given that the history of the East Indians were that of Muslim and Africans of that of Muslims from Africa? Islam has played a role in any way to bring any kind of harmony between those two races. So those are two questions I have for my brothers instead. I'll take Sabir first.
Before we go to the questions, I saw a couple of more people. I would like to recognize the founder of and a past board member, past president of Masjid Darus Salam in Thorncliffe, Mr. Abdul Hakingar is there, and also from the Durham Children Aid Society, Tahmina Bukhari, as well. The editor of the well-known paper Ambition, Sister Asma Varsi, and member of the ISRA board as well, Islamic Social Service, and the member of the Toronto Police Consultative Committees, Parveen Imam is there as well. So we have leaders, and if I miss, I know there are a number of other people there, but the questions that Habeeb has posed to the two speakers, maybe we could start with that, and then we'll take questions from the floor.
The first question would be, why was there no indentureship in Barbados? The simple reason is that Barbados was overpopulated at that time, and as it is so today. Barbados is 166 square miles, 21-mile length, and 14 in width. But you know, heaven is always tend to be beautiful and small. It's the most beautiful place anyway, but that's just a little advert for my tourism board. One of the reasons why is because Barbados was overpopulated, so they didn't need any indentured laborers. They had enough laborers, the slaves, who were willing to work and who were willing to be mistreated, so that even in the 1930s, you know, little boys like 5 years old and so on would be picking pond grass, and the overseer would just beat them, you know, with a cane, because they had to work. The women would work 6 days a week, from morning until night and get like $2. And that was the condition, dilapidated housing, but they had to bear it. They had to bear it because if you don't work, somebody else is just there behind you to work. So the answer would be because Barbados is very overpopulated and they didn't need any indenture laborers. However, what happened once is that a ship was heading for St. Vincent and it thought it ran aground at Carlisle Bay. That's the same place where Ratu came by Thor Hyderabad in 1970s when he set sail from Africa to prove that Africans came to the New World maybe 500 years before Columbus ever thought of coming. And what they did is that they had another ship ready and they transported, as they say, all the coolies from one ship to another ship. But apparently a few goats escaped. So we didn't have any indentured East Indians, but we had some goats that escaped. The second question would be that, of course, because of our late arrival in the Caribbean scene, we were not, and because those who came didn't know English, so what they had to do is they had to fend for themselves. They had to work hard, and so they were too busy, preserving their faith, of course, but trying to work hard so that they could call their families and make life better for themselves and their family in the future, But what happened with us, the coming generations, that it is we who are now making some sort of inroad in educating and enlightening the Barbadian population about Islam and Muslims in Barbados by doing so many things. I myself, as I had my column in one of the local newspapers for 15 years called Muslim View, and prior to that too, we have had Brother Degir and others who were going and talking to non-Barbadians about Islam. We didn't make much progress, to be honest with you. Even now, I think that our progress is very limited because we don't have that follow-up system. And I think that is very crucial when you really go and dawa work. And because Barbados is more into Tabligh Jamaat, the inward, most of them are not really interested in really talking to non-Muslims. And there are few of us who are, educating and enlightening. But then success does not mean that you have converted 2,000 non-Muslim into Islam, Success is that how do you carry yourselves? What is your relationship with those people with whom you live? And to that extent, then I think our success will be A+, because we have a very good attitude, we have very good relationship with the Barbadians. And I think that we are exposed, as I said earlier, even more than our population. And it shows, and it goes well. You could have, for example, my book. The foreword was written by the Prime Minister of Barbados. At the launch of my book, we had ministers and we had ministers of the churches. We had ministers of government. And I am happy to say that once every month, first Friday, I usually go on one of our radio program called Talk Your Talk. It's like, call-in program where you have two Christians, and then you have myself. We answer questions, and we talk about normally anything that has to do with morality, whether it has to do with drugs, what it has to do with anything else, So I think in that sense, not that we have lots of converts. We do. We have over 100 and somebody converts, and lots of young people are converting to Islam. We are maintaining our Muslim population. We are trying to make sure that our children stay within the concept of Islam, going to have salah, and doing things like that, and being good Muslims. But at the same time, we are educating Barbadians through our actions and our way of life and the way how we behave and so on. You don't see any Muslims in front of a judge. You don't see any Muslims being charged for anything. And this type of behavior, I think, even in Canada, it's not that you have to go and convert. Let your action speak for itself. And I think that is the key to success.
Thank you.
Yes, well, concerning the relationship between the two communities, I can't speak in details, as to what actually happened on the ground. I did live in Jamaica for 4 years. My wife is from Jamaica, and I lived there for 4 years. But really, the theme or part of the reality of the experience of African people and Indian people in the region, is one of struggle. And so people are struggling so hard just to survive. In the slavery period, obviously, it was a really terrible trauma that people were constantly going through. Their families broken up, their languages taken away. Even people who would pray could actually be tortured to death because they're making a salat, or even fasting in Ramadan, or praying, or doing anything Islamically. And so therefore there wasn't time to really reach out. And also with indentured labor, from what I've understood, and other people could speak in more details, it wasn't easy. It was struggle from sunrise to sunset. So people did not really have much time to really reach out to other communities because they were so busy surviving. Also within the evolution of Islamic movement, so to speak, and this is not only in the Caribbean, but it's in Canada as well, the whole concept of inward looking and outward looking. The inward looking, we are coming out of a colonial period. We are an embattled nation. And so because we were embattled within our countries and within the slavery and indentured labor period, we sort of like circled the wagons, as they would say. We took a defensive position in order to survive. But now, with independence and with technology, and with the 21st century ability to communicate, especially in our younger generation, we are now in the period of coming out. We should come out of ourselves, and that and really if we can be positive, and look at the experience, phases of the experience in the Caribbean, that this is now the phase where the butterfly, which is in the cocoon, as the little larvae, now the wings are formed, right? So now we have to fly now. And I remember in Jamaica around 1981, we formed the Islamic Council of Jamaica, where we brought together people from all over the island, and we formed a council, had an emir for the first time. And we decided we would go out to the communities. And one of the locations of the Indian Muslim community is Spanish Town. Spanish Town was one of the centers in Jamaica. And so we organized an outreach program. And the outreach was based on calling the community. And so we went door to door for about a mile radius around the masjid of Spanish Town, knocking on the doors and saying to the people, that is the local mosque there. What do you know about this? What do you think about this place? What do you think about the people that are in there? And we would, have a conversation. We went all around the area. And we were surprised. I mean, one person was saying that, I didn't know the difference. You telling me you believe in God? You actually talk about Mary and Jesus and Moses. You respect them and believe Jesus born without a father. They were in shock, right? They said sometimes the only difference I knew between the Muslim Indian or the Hindu Indian was that the Muslim is carrying this can of water in the toilet, man. And I'm like wondering, what has he got this water? He's always carrying this can of water. That's what they said. They didn't know any other difference, right? So I said, okay, we can see now that, people just didn't have time. Plus the ulama, they didn't have people, who had, the knowledge to do that. But once we explained, and then we cooked a big pot of curry, right? And some nice rice and everything. We called the neighbors to come in, and they sat, and we just explained Islam simple, just made salat, told them this is your house as well. And most of them, for the most part, they didn't accept Islam, but they said, if the criminals come around now after this, we're going to protect you. Just a simple act of just going out to the, and just showing kindness, right, and outreach like that. This is a process the whole Muslim community is going through. Even in Toronto now, we're going through this process. So it's not just the Caribbean. Just a simple act of opening up our doors, engaging society, right? Education, empowerment, engagement, right? We're empowered now. Engage. Just a simple act of kindness. one of the brothers in Texas, he said they had an outreach program, in Texas. And one of the local white Americans came in the mosque, and then they explained about Fajr prayer. And so he said, this is surprising. Every day I look down, I see 4:30, 5 o'clock, some people by your mosque in the dark, in the shadows. I thought they were the local drug dealers, who were like, putting their drugs for the day, right? You people are praying to God. This is amazing. That's what he said. This is an amazing thing, man. You're praying to God, and you will come that early in the morning for that? I respect you. So just the simple act of coming out, and this is what we hope and pray, that we, and our younger generation will now take it upon itself, to come out and share, our society and our culture, with the rest, of the people in the Caribbean and in Canada. Shukran.
Thank you. Thank you. We only have one question more. Maybe Anila would like to ask a question.
There's an old saying that goes, in 1492, America discovered Christopher Columbus. A question for probably Brother Quick. From what I know of Guyana, the African people in Guyana was the black slaves.
Along the coast of West Africa. And they trade with other African nations. And there, when they used to have warfare, they would have prisoners of war. So these prisoners of war would be integrated into society as slaves. That's what a slave meant in those days. So they would offer money, and they would take them and put them on the boat and then bring them into, South America, the Caribbean, North America. Okay, so the people are brought in the boat. Maybe the boat has 100 people on it. Maybe a third of them die on the way, unfortunately. The ones who live come from different nations and different tribes. It's anybody who they can capture. Whether you're a prince or a papa, doesn't matter what your language is. They capture you, put you on the boat, and bring you to the plantation. Once you get to the plantation, it's just hard labor. And so they will literally give you a name. So they will give you a name. Sometimes they'll change your name, to an anglicized name. I found this in Cape Town too. That happened with the Dutch as well. They were changing Muslims. So you'll find people by the name of Ibrahim Gabriels, Abdurrahman Hendricks. You'd never expect these two names. We thought we were the only people that lost our name, but Cape Town was a similar thing. So they literally, when they were making the register, they would anglicize your name. Or sometimes if it sounded too strange to them, Muhammad, whatever, Mo, whatever, they just change your name. Abu Bakr, whatever, Booker, just call him Booker. Bilal, this, Bailey. That's what they did. So literally, and then also what would happen is sometimes the slave master himself, if his name was Williams, then he would name everybody on the plantation Williams. So you would take that name, you take the name of the slave master. Okay. Also, Christianity was introduced. Then they had to pray in the Christian fashion. No Arabic, no Muslim, nothing. You cannot do any of that. So the first generation hid underground. They passed it on, but then it just started dying and dying and dying. And one of my friends in Philadelphia, said that his great grandmother, whose mother was in slavery, she used to say to them when they were bad, y'all ain't nothing but Aunt Hagar's illegitimate children. This is American slang, right? She said, you all ain't nothing but Aunt Hagar, Hajar, right? Aunt Hagar's illegitimate children, right? In other words, you bad little Arabs. So whenever they think you're bad, you're a Mandingo, or you're an Arab, or you're Aunt Hagar's illegitimate kids. What she was saying is the rebellious Muslims, right? You're a bunch of rebellious Muslims. The program Roots, right? Kunta Kinte, right? Alex Haley put it into a book and they made a movie out of it and whatnot. So this is what happened over a period of time. The name's completely lost, religion completely lost, identity is completely lost. And what happened in the Caribbean, and this is an important study to understand, because the slaves were not allowed to own property, right? But whereas indentured labor, they did allow people to have a plot of land. And so the consciousness of having land, of taking care of it and whatnot, and you keep your religion, that consciousness enabled the people in indentured labor to have a masjid, a madrasa, to continue. But the people who, they lost it. So for them, if they got some money, they just want to have a good time and, get high. Right? So because they lost the whole consciousness of having your own property, right? That's what happens in slavery. And even sometimes when they freed the slaves, some of them went back to the slave master. Because they said, I don't know what it's like to be independent. At least with a slave master, I know what I have to do. So it's completely lost. So what happens when the change is coming in now with independence, and the African people now are taking over, they become the military, the police, and things like this, right? But the landowners, were the people from the Indian background because they had the consciousness of land. So they had the land. So somehow, and this is where people who live the thing, I don't know the details, somehow a clash develops, right? And this is what, only Islam can solve this problem, right? That we have to, really show the people an example, of how Islam can break down, these barriers, and how we can really, mend these wounds.
Thank you. We have time, Habeeb, for any more? No. I will put one question to both speakers. What Sheikh mentioned about roots, that through Alex Haley's book and the documentary that was on TV, which ran for weeks, many Afro-Americans reverted to Islam, rediscovered their heritage. Recently, when we were in Spain, we found Spanish Muslim, because during the Inquisition in 1492, many were forcefully converted. Muslims and Jews were converted to Christianity. And some of the Spanish Muslims, we discovered that they are reverting back, now looking back at their past. What can bring about this reversal or such a phenomenon in the Caribbean in the years to come? That because this has not been promoted in the Caribbean, the Islamic heritage. Yeah. Maybe Sabir can also shed some.
Yeah, you can. I just want to make one short, small point. I would like to make a suggestion here, and I think we are online and whatnot. It may be seen in other places, but I would like to to encourage everybody to get obviously to get a copy of the book, right, and to encourage other people to get a copy of it. But I would encourage also that we make a documentary film out of this. We can make a film out of this. And when I was in South Africa, and we wanted to show to African people, the achievements of Muslims in Africa. So we said, okay, I worked with Munir Paka, who was a well-known producer, in Cape Town. And we put together, an hour program, one on Ethiopia, Untold Ethiopia. If any of you are online, put in my name, you can download it. It's called Untold Ethiopia. We also took another film crew to Timbuktu, and it showed on South African television 12 times, national television, SABC. So, I would suggest, as a means of spreading this, that we think about making a documentary film. And I can sit with the brothers and sisters and give you some ideas how we actually went about making this film. It's not that difficult to do. As long as you have people who have the expertise, someone who's a producer, and then you have interviews, and then you have a storyline, right? And then we get some good footage, right? Because people today learn through pictures more than they read, unfortunately. This is the Google age, the YouTube age, right? I was born in BC, right? Before computers, right? Which is only the 90s, right? Or sometimes we say I was born in BFP, before Facebook. It says here also in Jamaica there are still some remnants of Islam with the Maroons. Some names are still there. This is an interesting point too. That's another thing that happened. The most rebellious slaves, right? And the three islands or the three places in the Caribbean which are the most rebellious for African people. One was is Jamaica itself. Because the slaves who were uncontrollable, they would be sent to Jamaica to break. In the French colonialism, Haiti. The Dutch, Suriname. Okay, so what happened was the most rebellious slaves fought for their freedom and ran into the interior of Jamaica. And they liberated a section of the island. And they called them Maroons. Maroon is from the Spanish cimarrones. Cimarrones means a wild horse. So the Spanish could not control them. They said, the cimarrones, just leave them. So now they say Maroons. And up in Maroon Town, we went up there in Maroon Town, Jamaica, we found Qurans. Right? In Suriname, the bush blacks were mainly Muslims. And I was in Guyana last December. We had a big conference there, and Surinamese came, a big delegation of Surinamese. And they said, now we are from the town of Arabi and Zemzem, and we're coming back into Islam. So they maintained, this is a very interesting story about the most rebellious, people. But for the most part, it's very difficult to do this. So in conclusion, I would recommend, to make a documentary film out of this, right? Something we can put online, so people can see the story as well. And inshallah, I can give you an idea how to do this, and we can, hopefully put that out to the younger generation.
Do you want to add anything more? Simply as we have to wrap up.
Yes. Assalamu alaikum. I think for me, the most important thing should be that each and every Muslim should be proactive. Proactive not in the sense of, praying your salah and keeping your psalm, but proactive in a sense that you have your neighbors and your friends and your children's friends, your children's teachers. I think that you need to touch base with them, set a proper example, speak to your neighbors, invite them to your homes, in Eid day, and give them a literature and your attitude and your behavior, because that is how the Sahabas in other parts of the world changed the attitude and the behavior of non-Muslims, whether it was in China or whether it's in Somalia. I think so we need to begin with ourselves. Let's change our attitude, not only praying salah and keeping psalm, but educate and enlighten our children. You could be a good Muslim, be a good Muslim first, and you could be a good doctor, a good lawyer, but be a good Muslim yourself first. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. If you would like to have copies of the book, Brother Sabir will be signing copies, and he will also be we'll be taking pictures with him in front of here signing the copies. So I would like to ask Sabir to present a book to Dr. Abdullah Hakim quick, and he will be doing that as a formal presentation. While he gets in the book together, I just want to share one story with you quickly. I was in search of my roots in India when I was a student in India, and I found it in Allahabad. And my family in India, they're from the Shia background, and they're from Allahabad. And I went to visit them in the month of Ramadan, and I had that beautiful, red sharbat, lal sharbat wali. So, bade pyare hote, So I had the best of example and experience in India, and that is why I'm so fond of West Bengal. Abdul Haq, he doesn't like that, but we are taking over. And since I'm part of IDRF, International Development and Relief Foundation, this year for Qurbani, we are specifically identifying West Bengal to do the best of Qurbani. It's only $130 if you haven't signed up as yet. Only $20 for a share, and you can pay tribute to your legacy in West Bengal. So, Sabir, you here? Sabir, can you come forward with a book? Yeah. Assalamu alaikum. Subhanaka bihamdik wa nashhadu wa nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilaik.
खुशी के बजाए गए, शाद के नगमे सबको सुनाए गए, शादियाँ ने